6 years ago, my sister attacked me and stole my boyfriend. Now, my parents are attempting to reconcile us by inviting her to my bridal shower. My sister is 26, and I am 28. After a horrible incident that I will describe shortly, we haven't spoken for about 6 years. For whatever reason, my parents never discouraged the intense sibling rivalry that existed between us as we grew up. In fact, they often encouraged it, pushing us to compete with each other even more. In retrospect, I don't think that was wise because it fueled envy between us. Perhaps our relationship would have been better if they had intervened sooner. When we were younger, we could at least occasionally set aside our differences, but as we grew older, our animosity only intensified. By high school, we barely spoke to each other, and we were both fine with it. After I left for college, I only saw my sister when I came home, which was preferable to constantly being around someone who was unpleasant. Around the time I was graduating, I began dating my fiancé, who finally mustered the courage to ask me out after 3 years of friendship. Since I liked him too, I agreed without hesitation, as it didn't seem like a major shift in our relationship. After graduation, I moved in with him and brought him home one weekend for dinner to introduce him to my parents. Coincidentally, my sister, who had just started college, had also decided to spend the weekend at home. It was a recipe for disaster, and we were all present at the same time. My life was going well. I had a loving boyfriend, a career, and my own apartment. My sister, however, was struggling. She was upset about having to settle for her second-choice college after not getting into her first choice. My parents later told me she had difficulty making friends at college, which is why she returned home so often. I could sense her displeasure when I introduced my boyfriend to my parents. In the background, she pouted. I introduced them, and although my partner knew about our tense relationship, she immediately switched on her charm. I tried not to let it bother me, even though it felt strange. Things soon became even more bizarre. She started showing excessive interest in my boyfriend, trying to engage him in conversation while we all sat together. We were both uncomfortable but remained silent. Then she went further, openly flirting with him throughout dinner. She was blatant, clearly doing it to provoke me. I tried to ignore it at first, not wanting my boyfriend to see our family dysfunction, but I eventually reached my breaking point. I urged her to stop, insisting that her behavior was inappropriate, but she rolled her eyes and continued talking to him. I snapped and shouted that he was my guest and deserved respect, pointing out that she was making him uncomfortable. She countered by suggesting he deserved better, which escalated the situation. We began cursing at each other. I called her a loser and resentful, which deeply affected her. She grabbed my hair across the table and slapped me. Since we hadn't fought physically since middle school, I was initially shocked, but it escalated into a full-blown altercation. We were so violent that my boyfriend and our parents had to separate us. Both of us were hurt and scratched, yet the shouting continued. My partner pulled me away, drove me home, and reassured me, noting that the conflict might have gone on even longer if he hadn't been there. I was grateful for his presence, as I was extremely worked up. I completely stopped speaking to my sister after that. Although we had clashed before, this incident was far worse, and it was the final straw. Living apart already, I no longer felt compelled to consider her family. The next day, my parents called to tell me they had reprimanded her and hoped we could reconcile, even if she wasn't ready to apologize. I told them I had no interest in resolving the matter and wanted our relationship to remain estranged. They tried to convince me otherwise, but I reminded them they bore some responsibility, having ignored and even fostered our rivalry since childhood. They eventually apologized over the phone, which felt somewhat hollow, but I forgave them because I didn't want to sever ties with my parents. 6 years have passed, and I haven't spoken to my sister. I don't mind that she and my parents have a normal relationship, as long as they don't pressure me to reconcile. I've seen her at family gatherings, and we avoid each other, even during holidays. I prefer it that way. Everyone in the family knows we don't get along, but no one knows why. They only know about our fight, which left both of us in a bad light. I kept the secret for over 6 years, but at my bridal shower, I finally revealed the truth. My bridesmaids, maid of honor, close relatives, friends, and my fiancé were present. Despite not following the tradition of inviting only women, I wanted everyone I cared about there. However, my parents also chose to invite my estranged sister. I had no idea why, and I was stunned when she arrived. She looked just as surprised to see me. The room went quiet, a tense standoff forming. My parents approached and spoke to both of us, saying much had changed over the 6 years and expecting us to reconcile, believing we were older and more mature. My sister's expression revealed she had been coaxed into coming. I informed my parents they had no right to do this on such a significant day for me and gently asked them to leave before she could respond. My sister was there, and my parents refused to leave, so I tried to maintain my composure and dignity to avoid ruining the occasion. They advised me to move on from the past, giving the impression that nothing significant had occurred and implying it would be easy for me to just let go. This frustrated me immensely. To make sure they remembered exactly what had happened, and so everyone else in the room could understand, I recounted the entire episode from 6 years ago. I then asked if anyone in the room truly believed I could simply let go of this. Had I been marrying someone else, it might have been a different story, but I was marrying the same man my sister had openly flirted with when I first introduced him to the family. She had shamelessly done so in front of me, treating him as if he were an unwilling participant in some kind of tournament. Above all, she had attacked me physically after I called out her actions and labeled her a loser. I had never experienced anyone attempting to physically harm me in that way before, and it was traumatic. Despite all of this, she had acted as if nothing had happened and had never apologized in the 6 years since. I did not feel obligated to forgive her or move on. I deliberately kept her out of my life because it felt more important to preserve the reality of the past. My parents' assumption that they could simply bring her to my bridal shower and expect compliance was absurd. Fortunately, my sister recognized her mistake and left before my parents could argue further. My mother followed, presumably to appease her, as I assumed she was also unhappy about being misled. My father stayed with me briefly, but I told him that, since he had disappointed me, I did not want to speak with him at that moment. He became irritated and accused me of being irrational, claiming I was acting like a brat and that holding on to a 6-year-old incident made no sense. Although I didn't consider myself a brat, I told him to leave because I did not want to argue. He left after a few minutes. Afterward, I was so overwhelmed that I needed a few moments to regain my composure. Thankfully, my fiancé and maid of honor supported me, and after a short while, I returned to my usual self. Everyone else in attendance cooperated, giving me the space I needed to avoid thinking about my sister or father, and the celebration resumed as if nothing had happened. After the encounter, my fiancé and I went home, and we did not discuss the situation further. I was content with the fact that I had heard nothing from my parents since this incident, which had occurred roughly 5 days prior. I felt that some time apart was necessary after their actions. However, I did not anticipate hearing from them so soon. When they did contact me, it was not to offer an apology but to hold me accountable for my sister's predicament. My mother called me on the phone, and as soon as I answered, she instructed me to contact my aunt to ensure she offered my sister the position she had been discussing. I urged my mother to slow down, as she sounded agitated and panicked, and I was initially confused. She explained that my sister had been out of work for roughly 6 months due to layoffs at her previous employer and had recently moved back in with our parents after realizing she could not afford rent. She had been searching for a job but had not been able to find one that paid adequately or suited her preferences. My mother had discussed this with my aunt, who was launching a new company. Since my sister had previously worked in marketing, my aunt initially intended to appoint her as head of marketing. However, after the bridal shower episode and my recounting of the events from 6 years ago, my aunt stopped responding and ultimately rescinded the offer. Given that I had always been my aunt's favorite, I was not surprised, and I found the explanation plausible. When my mother forwarded my aunt's message, it became clear that my aunt had determined my sister had severe anger management issues based on the incident I described. She was also unhappy that my sister had never apologized, not even at the bridal shower. My aunt explained that, although she had first chosen my sister because of family ties, she had since interviewed a more competent candidate and now planned to offer the position to that person. This seemed entirely reasonable to me, and I was genuinely glad my aunt had reconsidered. I informed my mother that I could not intervene. I did not want my aunt to harm my sister's career due to nepotism, and the decision to hire someone more qualified was fair. My mother began to panic and yelled at me, insisting that I had unnecessarily brought up an issue from years ago. She claimed I didn't need to mention it during my bridal shower, even though I had recounted the incident as it originally happened. I had called my sister a loser before she attacked me. I disagreed with her assertion that I had raised the story to harm my sister's reputation. For the record, recounting the incident was not an attempt to make myself look virtuous. Calling her derogatory names did not excuse the physical assault, and it was unfair of my mother to suggest otherwise. I blocked my parents and hung up. After reflecting, I questioned whether revisiting the incident at all had been wise. My mother argued that I had not given my sister a chance, implying that she had matured over the years. She also claimed I had caused my sister to lose a job opportunity by recounting her attack. I felt justified in protecting myself and acknowledging the reality of her behavior. My parents had no other method to reach me, and I truly didn't have time to deal with the situation, as my wedding was only a few weeks away. I already had so much on my plate. I had just returned from work, and my fiancé and I needed to leave immediately for a last-minute wedding dress fitting. When my parents arrived, I told them to leave as we were about to go, but they showed up at the wrong time. I knew that if we opened the door, they would find a way to keep talking and irritate me. Even after I threatened to call the police, they didn't leave. To be honest, I didn't want to call the police because it felt excessive. I'm not the type of person to involve authorities over everything. After talking it over with my fiancé, we decided to let them in, give them a brief hearing, and then move on. We opened the door and urged them to hurry, as we had other commitments. Fortunately, my parents were straightforward. They told me that my aunt had withdrawn her offer to hire my sister because of my actions at the bridal shower, insisting I contact my aunt to help my sister secure employment, essentially blaming me. I didn't want to repeat myself, as it was the same argument we had over the phone. I explained that I could not do anything about it, having already discussed it with my mother. They were aware of how busy I was with the wedding preparations, so coming to our home to discuss the same issue again seemed pointless. Then my sister spoke. She claimed they were there for another reason, which surprised me, since this was our first conversation in 6 years. She said she was there because she wanted to apologize to me. At the time, I didn't know how to respond, as I didn't trust her intentions and had serious doubts about why she was there. I asked her directly if her apology was genuine, or if she was only there to try to use me to secure the job. I told her I couldn't help her, so there was no reason to waste her words if it was only about employment. She seemed slightly taken aback by my candor, but clarified that her purpose was genuinely to apologize, while my parents had come regarding the job. It was clear they hadn't coordinated. This because even my parents looked surprised. My sister, however, appeared unconcerned and said she had no interest in the position. Over the previous 6 years, she had thought a lot about her actions against me, but had always found reasons not to apologize. Now, she could no longer deny that she had mistreated me. During our conversation, I could tell she was serious based on her tone and behavior. She admitted that she had been resentful of me since childhood because she felt she had to compete with me, and that in the real world, nothing mattered. She realized she had wasted her youth and adolescence trying to defeat me and expressed remorse, acknowledging that we could have been friends. She also admitted that she had pushed me away because she always viewed me as a rival. Hearing her confess all of this was overwhelming. I had felt the same way, so it was almost surreal. I was embarrassed to admit that I began to cry as she spoke. Afterward, she addressed my fiancé, apologizing for the way she had treated him during their one and only encounter. She acknowledged that her apology was long overdue and confessed that she had been so consumed with competing with me that she had lost sight of the kind of person she had become. She did not wait for a response or expect forgiveness. She simply stated that she had said what needed to be said and would now stop bothering us. Only my parents, fiancé, and I remained in the room. None of us had anticipated her honesty, so we sat in awe, processing what had just happened. My fiancé and I went to my fitting afterward, and my parents eventually left without a word. We didn't discuss the situation until we returned home, roughly 30 minutes later. Even though it took her 6 years, I felt her apology was extremely mature and heartfelt. My fiancé and I are still deciding whether to forgive her, as it's too soon to say. We may contact her later to express our forgiveness, but I need more time to process everything. I am, however, genuinely happy that she realized we could have been friends. Regarding my parents, I realized I hadn't mentioned what I intended to do about them. Honestly, I had been so focused on my sister that I had forgotten. Since their last visit, they have not contacted us. We plan to continue avoiding them because I don't believe they are truly sorry. I hold them responsible for much of the conflict between my sister and me, as well as for making it difficult to maintain a healthy relationship with them. Despite my best efforts over 6 years, they have consistently failed to act like responsible, caring parents. I have tried to forgive them, but I feel at my limit. People who disregard my feelings, or even my sister's, cannot continue to be excused. We will not be communicating with them, and I doubt they will attend my wedding. My fiancé and I plan to contact them soon to formally inform them that they are no longer invited. Update 3. Last week I got married. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had envisioned. My parents were not present as expected. They informed me via email that they would not attend, claiming that my sister and I had demonized them and blamed them for the strained family relationships. They wrote that, despite their efforts to be good parents, they now intend to live separately, taking time off because they feel unvalued by us. I am fine with that. Happier news. A few days after my most recent update, I contacted my sister. I invited her to the wedding and accepted her apology. She joyfully attended, and it was a wonderful day. A few months ago, it would have seemed absurd to imagine that my sister would attend instead of my parents, but that's what happened. Everything went smoothly, and I am finally rebuilding my relationship with my sister. This is enough for now, although perhaps my parents may eventually change their minds and apologize. Life has never been better, and my husband and I are soon departing for our honeymoon.